Getting form input from users is a critical part of JavaScript. It's an operation that we do all the time in JavaScript because JavaScript is very commonly used to interact with users on web pages. And one of the ways that we get data from users is using forms. So getting input from forms is an important part of what we do. And I want to show you the basics right now. All right, so if we have a form, and I've sort of pre-made a form for us here in HTML, you can see I've got a input box named username and a password box with the word with the ID of password. So those will be easy to remember. So in my JavaScript here, there's a few things that I've done here. The first thing I've done is I've created a constant because this form is not going to change. We're going to create a constant called form, and I'm going to use document get element by ID my form. So that refers to the actual form element of the web page. And then I'm going to add an event listener to that form. So I'm going to use form.add event listener, and I'm going to listen for the submit event. And when I do that, I'm going to run this anonymous function. And the first thing I'm going to do is use event.preventDefault. And what that does is it actually prevents the form from doing what it would normally do when I hit submit, and that would be to submit that form to another page or a script somewhere. I don't want it to do that. I just want it to stay right here on this page. So I'm using event.preventDefault to keep that form from actually submitting. Okay, and that's actually pretty common in JavaScript, because if you want to sort of hijack what that form does, and instead of having that form submit the way a normal HTML form would submit and go to a different page, like let's say you want to stay on this page and do some processing with the data the user puts in the form, you would use this method to keep the script on this page because you don't want it to go anywhere. So the next thing we do is we create constants to refer to the password input and the username input by using document get element by ID. And then we're actually taking the username input value and putting it into a variable. Sometimes you can skip that step. Sometimes it's nice to just reduce that value to a variable. Now, this is an important thing to do when you're wanting to access the value, because the username input actually refers to that element, that form element. So if I want to get the thing that the user typed in, then I have to go to the username input dot value, because that says give me the thing that the user typed in that form element and return that. And in this case, we're going to put that in a variable called username. So we can see here username and password. And basically what this expression says, what this says is if there is something in username, if it's not empty, and if password is not empty. So we're using the Boolean operator here. And instead of saying if username is true, we can just say if username, because if it's empty, it will return a false. If it has anything in it, it will return a true. Same with password. So if username and password have something in it, anything, then it will return an alert that says form was submitted successfully. If it doesn't, then it will say, please fill out both fields. So let's just try this out. If I submit that form with nothing in it, you can see it says fill out both fields. Same thing if I just fill out one of those fields. If I put anything in both of them, then it says form submitted successfully. So that tells me that I'm able to get those things. So if I want to, I can actually use the password or the username and return those instead. So let's say the form was submitted successfully. Instead of that, I could use a string concatenation to put together a little string that it returns on the fly. I could say something like username that plus a couple spaces, and then password is, okay, so let's get username in here, and we'll add the password. So all this is doing is just taking the values that the user puts in, right, in username and password, and putting them together in this string, and then it's going to send that back via the alert. So if I type something in both of those spots and I hit submit, oops, looks like I forgot to save it. Let's try this again. There we go. Okay, so now that I saved it and tried it, that always fixes everything. We've got username, B Moseley, and password test. Okay, so don't tell anybody what my password is. Anyhow, so that is how we can capture form input, and value is sort of the key there when we're using. So we're going to refer to the form element by its ID, and then we're going to use value to capture whatever the user's response is, and that will work for most types of form elements. Okay, so that is how we take that information, whatever the user types in, and put that into something, which we can then display in a div or do something else if we wanted to. So if I had a div of an ID with like display, okay, I could, let's make it nice and big too. Actually, let's just, instead of a div, let's use a heading. So it's already big, H1. There we go, H1 with an ID of display. I can address that just like a div. So let's say I want to say document get element by ID display dot inner text equals, and let's put the username in there. Okay, so now when I submit the form, and I'll remember to save it this time, when I submit the form, whatever's in there is going to now be, oh, I got to fill out both fields. There we go. Now it's going to show the alert because that was first in the code, and then it should display that as part on the page. So that's how some of the ways that you can use form input in your scripts.